Music can be incredibly evocative, can't it? We can be perfectly happily existing in the present, and then we hear a song and we're taken straight back to a different time in our lives which we associate with that song, and we just can't help it. And I'd like you to reflect on that before you listen to D.H. Lawrence's Piano, because that poem is all about that feeling of hearing some music, sound, and being transported somewhere else because of it.
Softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, taking me back down the vista of years, till I see a child sitting under the piano, in the boom of the tingling strings, and pressing the small, poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. In spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me back, till the heart of me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings at home, with winter outside, and hymns in the cosy parlour, the tinkling piano our guide. So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamour with the great black piano appassionato. The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past.
I've done some colour coding here so that the rhyme scheme stands out. You can see that we have a poem that's written in rhyming couplets, A, A, B, B, C, C, and so on. So a very simple rhyme scheme, which perhaps reflects the idea that this poem explores childhood. So there's a simplicity about the rhyming scheme that is entirely appropriate. It's interesting, though, that you don't really hear the rhyming couplets when the poem's read. It doesn't bounce along in a regular, rhythmic way like most poems written in rhyming couplets. That's because Lawrence has used lines of different lengths in this poem. They're actually unusually long lines, most of them, and it's almost as if he's flooded with this memory that can't be contained within a shorter, regular line. There's another reason that the rhyme scheme is slightly disguised, and that's the fact that there is an awful lot of enjambment in this poem. I'll give you the term in a minute up on a slide, but basically, that's a device whereby a single phrase is carried on between two lines. So an idea isn't completed at the end of one line, it carries through to the next line, which again creates a sense of flow through the poem, and I think adds to this idea of D.H. Lawrence being flooded with a memory so powerful that he can't control it. Another interesting feature of structure is the way that within each stanza, D.H. Lawrence moves from the present, where he's listening to a woman singing, to the past, where he recalls a time when his mother would sing at the piano and he would be at her feet listening. Within each stanza, we have two lines on the present and then two lines that take us back into the past. The interesting thing, though, is that the lines about the past are written in the present tense. So, a mother who smiles as she sings, not a mother who smiled as she sang. So we have the present tense throughout the poem, and it's almost as if the memory is so vivid that it becomes the present, that D.H. Lawrence is reliving this boyhood experience. Softly in the dusk, the poem begins, and the tone is set immediately. This is a gentle poem. This is the poet recollecting a lost past. And there is a sense of loss in the poem because obviously the current reality doesn't match up to the past. He remembers it with great longing. So it's a sad, melancholic, gentle poem, and the tone is very much affected by the sound effects in it, the notion of the piano and its tinkling notes, which we'll explore more closely when we look at use of language. This poem is about piano music, partly, and D.H. Lawrence uses alliteration to create a musical effect. So we have sibilants in that first line, with the s of the softly being picked up through the line. And again, at the end of the stanza, smiles and sings are words connected through their sibilants. And it's important to remember that alliteration does do that. It's not just about sound effects. Words that begin with the same sound are linked in the listener's mind. So the p of pressing, poised feet, links the notion of the mother's poised, therefore very delicate, elegant feet, and her young son pressing himself against those feet. Suggested there is an intimacy, a comfortableness that you'd expect between mother and son, a physical intimacy. Notice in the first line that the woman is not a random woman, she's singing to me, which suggests a relationship. And one thing we'll do as the poem unfolds is consider the contrasting relationships between D.H. Lawrence and his mother, and what's suggested about the relationship with the woman who's playing the piano in the present. Lawrence refers to the vista of years to describe the passage of time. A vista is a view, isn't it? A beautiful, wide view. And it's interesting to note that Lawrence is looking down the vista of years, suggesting perhaps that he's standing on a height and looking down into his childhood, as if it's almost at the bottom of a valley. Does this suggest perhaps that life for him has been an uphill struggle? It's certainly an interpretation worth thinking about. Lawrence uses lots of sensory language in this poem so that we feel like him, that we're sitting there under the piano listening to his mother's singing. The word boom is of course onomatopoeic and conveys very powerfully the sound of the piano as the boy is huddled right next to it, and we have tingling strings, which again is an evocative sound effect. Notice the assonance in tingling strings, short vowel sounds there, suggesting the lightness of the mother's touch on the piano, and again helping to transport us, as well as Lawrence, to this moment that he remembers so fondly. This stanza introduces the notion of real pain, emotional pain. The poet's heart weeps to belong again, so he obviously no longer feels that he does belong in the way that he did when he was a boy, sharing Sunday evenings with his mother. The adjective cosy suggests something of the warmth of those times, and again we have the evocative sound effect, tinkling, piano. Winter outside, so that idea of being protected from the elements. So he only goes there in spite of myself, and the phrase betrays me back again shows that he's trying to resist this return to his childhood. But the power of the song, the insidious mastery of song, is such that he can't resist it. Insidious is a word that describes a creeping evil. So obviously the poet has very fond memories of the past, but because of the painful contrast to the present, it's a bittersweet recollection that this poem is trying to capture. So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamour with a great black piano appassionato. The tone shifts slightly there. For me, it's almost angry, as if the woman playing the piano and singing is desperately trying to recall the listener, D.H. Lawrence, to the present, maybe threatened by the idea of him being lost in the past. So she plays appassionato, that means with great feeling, and the piano is described as a great black piano. So those words have a weight because they're stressed syllables. Of course, we associate the adjective black with the notion of black moods as well, and certainly that word lends a darkness to these lines. The singer also bursts into clamour. Now, clamour isn't a word that we would usually pick to describe a song, because the clamour refers to a sort of persistent outcry. There's a clamour when people are outraged. So again, there's a sense of discord between D.H. Lawrence and this woman who is playing to him in vain, as it would appear. And look at the word that rhymes with clamour. It's glamour. And because of the rhyme, those two words are linked together in the ear of the listener. So the present is about clamour, sound and fury and black pianos, appassionato, whereas the past is about glamour. And that's a painful contrast that D.H. Lawrence is drawing there. Pain is emphasised in the final lines of the poem because he ends up crying for the past. He weeps like a child for the past, and it's with a profound sense of loss that he remembers it. He's flooded with remembrance, completely overwhelmed by these memories of the warmth and the coziness and the sense of belonging and the intimacy that he once cherished and which would appear to be absent from his current existence. Two major themes in this poem for me. First, it's obviously about the power of music to grab us and transport us to a different time, even against our wishes. And in this poem, D.H. Lawrence really doesn't want to go back to his past because it's painful for him. But the music is so overwhelmingly evocative that he simply can't resist it. He has to go there. And we can all think of times when music's done that to us, I'm sure. It's also a poem about relationships, and we have a sense of a difficult relationship in the present compared to a very simple, pure, and fulfilling relationship in the past, where D.H. Lawrence simply felt secure in his mother's love. Piano is written in the first person, and we get the strong sense that it's autobiographical, and D.H. Lawrence is sharing with us his own experience of hearing some music and being taken back to another time where things were happier, simpler, and he felt like he belonged.